Welcome to Pragmatic Talks, a podcast and video series where we discuss startups, contemporary digital product development, modern technologies, and product management. I am Wiktor Żolnowski, a CEO of Pragmatic Coders, the first choice software development partners for founders. For today's episode, we invited Tomasz Wykowski, the CEO and founder of ProCognita, one of the biggest Agile Consulting companies in Poland. Aside from being an Agile Coach and consultant, Tomasz is a certified Scrum trainer from Scrum Alliance and less friendly Scrum trainer accredited by the LESS company. Tomasz is an expert in modern software development management methods. Some of you will sooner or later get to the point where you will start growing your team and scaling up your business. Or maybe you are already there and you have noticed that it could have been done better. In this episode, we'll answer the question of how to grow your startup right. Listen to what mistakes you should avoid when growing your company, or how to deal with its results if you haven't avoided them in the past. We'll also touch on the topic of company culture and its impact on effectiveness and results. You will also get a few tips on maintaining agility when growing your team. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Tomasz Wykowski. Welcome, Tomasz Wykowski. It's a great pleasure to have you here today.
Thanks for inviting me.
So the first question, who is Tomasz Wykowski and what is your story?
Okay, so the very short answer is I'm helping leaders to build adaptive and learning organization. The longer, I would say, used to be a developer, used to be quality engineer, turn into project manager, and turn into Scrum Master, and few other roles.
So long story short, right now you are Agile Consultant, Agile Trainer.
Yeah, let's put it to this one, and founder and owner of ProCognita company.
And ProCognita is a company
which does coaching and consulting and training. Surprise, right?
Perfect. So as an Agile Consultant, you have an opportunity to work with various companies. Could you tell us a little bit more about those companies? Are those startups, scale-ups, corporate mainly? How does it look like?
The answer is yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I and we as ProCognita work with things starting with the super small few people companies or even the founders trying to figure out how to do what they want to do, up to large international corporates doing telco, doing banking. The spectrum is broad, although my favorite kind of customer are like a medium-sized company, and by medium-sized I'm thinking about something 60, 100 people. And there are a pretty good number of reasons why is that. And again, it's not a magical number. So it's not about if you have 55, that's that bad idea. If you have 120, that's free. That's a bad idea, but it's like there's a different dynamic of working with this kind of companies.
So what's different between working with smaller companies, like up to 60, let's say, and 20, 30 people, and what's different with the companies that's more than 100 or 200 or even 1,000 people? And what's so special in this group of 60 to 100?
So here's the thing. If we are supposed to build a learning and adaptive organization, you have 6 people in the organization. You don't need to have a formal structure. You can, but basically, each person can talk to everyone, and we can have a lunch together. We can do something together. In most cases, if we need to do something there, and there is one person who will stand up and do something, otherwise it's not gonna fly, right? Mm-hmm. Saying that, we had a situation when we had a call from the CEO of the company who said, we had a problem because IT is not talking to business. And we said, how big you are as a company? And they say 5 people, right? So I understand, that might be a problem, but basically you have 5 people and you have a problem with IT not talking to business people. Then probably we need to have a conversation about the goal of your company with the people you have in the organization, not to build a better structure in this organization. So 5 people is one side. Now, when you grow the company and you have like 12 people, maybe 15 people, then you will figure out that you need to build sub-teams that are specializing in something. Now that changes structure. Then you grow up and you have like 60 people and you see that the previous structure doesn't work anymore. Now you end up with having 100 people, 200 people, and the previous structure doesn't work anymore. So why not 2,000 people? Because my observation is that if you have like 10,000 people and you want to have any change, and there is usually in this kind of companies, there is a lot of politics happening. My observation is between the moment when I do something and there are some visible results in this organization, it takes ages, it takes years, it takes decades.
If ever.
If ever, I mean, most of those organizations change, but a little bit too slow for me because, my life expectation is usually shorter than the change expectation. Again, saying that, I can see those changes in the organization. Like a decade ago, I used to work with the BNP Paribas here in Krakow. We did some change, we have some result, but that was like a team level result, so not a huge change on the organization level. Now, for different reasons, we had to stop this cooperation. Those were the business reasons. We still love each other. Although I was not able to help them for the next few years, and not even month. And like a year or 2 years ago, I've learned that they are doing a lot of great things inside the company with help of other people, although they still have a good memories for some reason about what we did, a decade ago. So it happened on those kind of companies. Just when I go to the company which has 100 people, when we do something, then I can see the results like, few weeks later, few months later. So when we have a discussion and we say, hey, how about you change the structure of the organization? Then, 3 months later, we figure out that they have changed the structure of the organization, not still working on how to do this or how to approach the HR department and all this stuff, right?
So, I can imagine that many people who are watching it, especially startup founders, people who growing their companies, they may start to thinking, okay, should I hire Agile Consultant, or what's the role of Agile Consultant? Why to hire someone from the outside of the organization to help me in what? What's your role? What's your goal with your Agile Consultant?
Well, the answer is, if you don't know if you should hire Agile Consultant, then probably the answer is no, because you should not hire Agile Consultant to hire Agile Consultant. The first question is, what kind of challenges you have in the organization, and is there anything in our portfolio that can help you solve those problems? So what we do is we try to help you build the adaptive organization. Now, if you are the startup organization, you most likely are working on the new market, pretty dynamic market, and with pretty lot of things changing and a lot of things that you need to learn. Pretty good idea, to create an adaptive company. If you have a plan and you want to stick to this plan, as long as you have a lot of sponsors, then fine, but otherwise, the moment you will run out the budget, then you will have a problem, because you will discover that your idea is pretty great idea, but the customer has a different way of thinking. So basically, the moment you see that you're not adaptive enough for your market, then it's a pretty good idea to call someone to have a look at the organization.
What does it mean to be adaptive in terms of being company?
So to make it super simple, we love to have predictive world. We love to create a plan. Like you create a business plan, you go to the sponsors, they say, yeah, that's awesome plan. You execute the plan, you make a lot of money, and you live happy ever after. Except that this doesn't happen, except for the fairy tales, right? You have a plan, and you discover that the plan is wrong, and you need to change it. You need to adapt it to the reality. Now, the question is how quickly you can adapt to the reality, and can you create a product? Can you create a business that can earn money before you run out of your own money or your sponsor's money, right? And this is the question. Now, the more innovative product, the more new market it is, the more likely you need to be adaptive in this market.
Why? This is the question I've heard like a few times. Okay, why should I care about being adaptive? Why should I care about the agility?
Because you don't know what you don't know. So the challenge here is, we get some knowledge. You know the business, you know the marketing. You are creating the company, you're creating the startup because you've seen the chance of building something on the market. Now you have some knowledge about this market. You have some knowledge about the technology, or maybe your friend has. You have some other knowledge about how to get money and all this stuff. That's awesome. There are some risks. The risks are the things you know that you don't know. So you know the question. For example, the risk is what the customer will do. The risk is how the I don't know the competitors will behave, all the stuff. And there are things I call unknowns, which are the things you don't know that you don't know. Basically, it means they're gonna blow up into your face in the middle of the development, and you have no idea why. So my favorite story here just comes from NASA. In 1998, NASA sent a probe to Mars. And the probe approached Mars in 1999, and then with the full speed, it hit the Mars. Post-mortem for the probe, they discovered that NASA was using the metric system, but the subcontractor decided for the English system. Now, the learning cost over 300 million USD. The trick is like, we can say that those people were stupid. That's a simple answer, but it's completely wrong answer, a wrong assumption, right? Or we can say why they didn't ask the question. And the reason why they didn't ask the question is because they didn't know that the subcontractor can use the different system. So they didn't know that they don't know. So they didn't have a question. Now, because you don't have a question, you cannot ask the question. So sooner or later, you're going to discover something you don't know, and you either change the development of the product, or you're gonna stick to the plan you have created. There's also a recording from Gojko Agis, who's been here in Krakow, and he has shown how he is building his own startup, and the startup is called Narakit.
Mm-hmm.
And he's showing how the Narakit grow, and he's saying that in one moment I had a situation when I had a plenty of users coming from India and say, hey, awesome, we have a huge growth of the users, except no one is paying for my product. So either they're gonna start paying, or I'm out of the business in like for a few days. And this is during the videos. I'm not gonna tell the story because I'm way worse in telling his story than his. But during the video, he showed how he discovered why there's so many people coming from India to his system, and what he did about this, to make his company successful. So you need to either to adapt, or you need to have a plenty of money, or you need to be the only company on this market, and you have a monopoly on this market.
Yeah, so this is something that's pretty important, especially for companies that are not having unlimited budgets.
Most of them
don't have unlimited budget, but there are some.
Yes,
that has.
In this case, most likely you don't need to be adaptive. The cost of changing the organization, especially the biggest budget you have in a large organization, the cost of changing the organization from like a predictive approach when you have a plan, execute the plan, to a more adaptive organization is pretty high. And if you have unlimited budget, then you just hire more people.
Mm-hmm. In some of the previous episodes with Michał Kania about the product management, we also discussed that the too big budget might be a problem for a product company.
It is, because you hire more people.
You hire more people instead of solving the problem.
Yeah, Jürgen de Smet, one of the smartest people from our organization. What he's saying, when you have a problem X, you hire the X specialist, and you end up with having a lot of specialists, but you cannot do any work because you have a lot of specialists who need to cooperate, and you don't know how to do it. So you hire more people, and most likely you're going to hire, specialists on the corporation and call them whatever, project manager or whatever, and try to push the work to those people.
Mm-hmm. So getting back to your role as an Agile consultant, so you're helping companies to become adaptive. How you do that?
I'm helping leaders to create an adaptive organization.
Great.
So this is
something else that I heard. Like maybe I was even discussing at some of the conferences or all conferences where we have this discussion about if a CEO is hiring Agile consultants to make his organization agile, he's already failing, because he shouldn't hire the Agile consultant for changing the organization. He should hire Agile consultant to help him to change the organization.
So there is a great metaphor of when you change the organization is like going to gym. You can hire someone to do push-up for you, but most likely it's not going to help you for some reason, right? So this is the game with the Agile Coach. The Agile Coach is the annoying guy that stands over you in a gym and saying, how you can do more, you can do better, right?
Mhm.
And most likely the companies are going to say, no, you don't understand our context. But most cases they can, because I've seen the other companies doing better. They still don't know they can, right?
So, from your perspective, what's the difference when you are working with, or if there is any difference when you're working with startups or with grown companies like a scale-ups or corporate? Do you have any different approach, or you just use pretty the same tools and methods for both?
You asked two questions, and the answer for both are different. So the answer for if I use the different tools, no, but is the approach is different? Yeah. So then to answer the second question first, basically, if I'm being hired, my question is why I'm being hired. I don't want to work with any company to do Agile for the sake of Agile, right? So if anyone telling me is like, we want to be Agile, is like question why? What is the problem you're trying to solve, right? There are different reasons. And some companies say we're not innovative enough. Some companies say people are leaving the company. Some companies say, okay, our competitors are eating our market. And so on and so on, so on. And the other companies are saying we cannot deliver on promise, anything, right? So what is the problem we're trying to solve? Now, the second question is how we're going to solve this problem is like what kind of experiment we're going to try in your organization. Why experiment? I'm going to say in a second. To solve this problem, right? So what is the potential root cause of the problem we have, and what we're gonna try? Why experiment? Because your organization is a complex system, and I have no idea what is gonna work in your organization. At that time, I was pretty sure I know what is the solution of your problem. It wasn't the solution of the problem. So right now, my assumption is I don't know. But let's do a cheap experiment and see what we can learn. Now, coming back to the first question about the startups and the grow-ups, is like you have a different kind of problems. I mean, most likely you don't have a problem of the IT people not talking to business people if you have 5 people again.
Most likely.
Some cases, most likely you haven't built the silos yet. Most likely you still have a contact between the users and the developers. When you have 100 people, 200 people, and again, it's not about magic number. I've seen there was a company in Krakow, Codewise, and there were like at peak moment there were like 400 people, and I would say that like a small company still because of the way they're working, right? And you can build the small company of 50 people and have a super hierarchical structure and have a huge amount of politics inside, and just I'm not going to call it small company. That's a big company. Small number of people, let's say, right? So in a startup, you're going to have different solution, different experiment, different problem most likely to solve.
But still, your tool is mainly experimenting with the organization. Providing some data, experimenting, learning.
So what you do as a Scrum Master or Agile Coach, call it whatever, you basically observe the organization from outside. And that is basically the superpower the Scrum Master or other coaches have, is we're not involved into your politics. We're not involved into your system. We're trying to be, we're trying to observe the system and see what is the dynamic, see what are the patterns we can discover. And because you're inside this company, you're involved in making this company happen, and you're involved in making this company make money and all this stuff and make customer happy, then you may not see some patterns. And my goal is to see this pattern. Now, the second step is to show you those patterns. And most likely I'm going to show you those patterns and you're going to say, Tomek, you're wrong. You don't understand our context. Now, so it's going to take a few months to understand that this is your context and this is the problem you're trying to solve. This is why I prefer smaller companies, because it takes a few years in the larger companies, and then finally say, okay, I agree we had the problem, so show me the solution. I say, okay, I don't have a solution, but probably this kind of experiment might help you because I've seen them working in the other companies.
You already mentioned the structure of growing companies. Even for a 50 people company, you can have a heavy structured or heavy, a hierarchical structure of the organization. But as you mentioned, for a 400 people company, you can still have like a less hierarchical structure. What's the impact of the company structure on its effectiveness or its ability to build innovative products?
So just to mention, you can have 10 people and have a structure in the organization, right? So here's the thing. Because we don't know what we don't know, we want to put people who solve the problem close to the people who has problem. So basically, the crazy idea of adaptive or agile development is make sure that the users has a face-to-face interaction with the developers. And by developers, I don't mean coders. By developers, I mean people who are responsible for developing the solution for the problem.
So coders also.
If you have a marketing department and this marketing department doesn't work, then the marketing people are the developers in this case, right? So, as ProCognita, we're helping with software development, which is most common because these are the main our customer, but we're doing hardware development. We're helping our hardware development companies. We're helping marketing. We're helping sales. We're helping customer support teams. So, how do you make sure that those people have a close interaction with the users? The second question is, how do you make sure that those people, those developers, can solve the problems of those users? And many cases, what you discover in the organization, you build something we know from the kindergarten, and it used to be called Chinese whispering. When you have one person saying something to the next person, saying something to the next person, and so on, so on, so on. At the end of the system, you have a developer who is supposed to solve the problem, except that he has no idea what to solve. In many cases, he just get the information, create a drop-down menu. Why? For who? What is the reason? No. Again, trust me.
That is what it is.
That is one comment, and the second is developers are too expensive to talk to users. So let's have a cheaper analyst who's gonna to build a solution, and you end up with the solution that is not solving the problem of the users. And you end up with a situation when we finally make those those developers have a conversation with the users, they discover how painful it is for the user to use the product. Just recently, I had a situation about the developers going to the customer, seeing how the user are using the application, and the user is using the application, and at one moment he zoom out, he press the button and zoom in again. And they are thinking, why the hell is happening? And they go back to the office and they discover that they have a different resolution on the screen. So it is fine on their screen because the button is there on their screen. But if the user has a different screen resolution, surprise, surprise again, what you discover is that they don't see the button, so they cannot click the button unless they zoom in or zoom out. And you want to have this happening. You want to have this conversation happening, which means, coming back to your question, you need to have a structure when you can have people who solve the problem deliver the solution. So either we build the teams that can solve the problem, understand the problem, create the solution and deliver the solution, and check if we really solve this problem, or otherwise you have a Chinese whispering and people are creating a lot of documentation. Because at the end of the Chinese whispering game, 2 years into the product development, when we go to production and we discover that the user is not using the product the way we thought they're going to use, and most of the cases it means they're saying, what is that? And why do I have this one? I wanted something else. What is usually happen in the organization who has Chinese whispering, they start looking for someone to blame. How do you blame people after 2 years of software development? Well, you open all the documentation, you open your Jira ticket, you open your PRD document, whatever, and you start looking who make a fault. Now, how do you solve the problem of not being guilty? Is you create more documentation. So you end up with having a lot of documentation but no software working in this company, right? So long story short,
this is how the big corporations usually look like. Not all of them, but
this is interesting because often what you figure out is like you have 50 people in an organization and you have a Java team, team in quotes. We can dive into this one. you have tester teams, you have analyst team, you have front-end team, and so on, so on. And you figure out that you have 20 people in an organization, and still you have all this fancy Chinese whispering system. One day I was having exactly this conversation about the knowledge transfer in the organization, and we decided to throw on the wall, on flip chart, of course, not on the wall physical, how the information go through the system. And we ended up with having from the top of the wall to the bottom of the wall, next rows in each row, and then information going from one person to another, from one person to another. And that was just from one simple change into the system. And that was 20, 30 people company, right? So not to mention 3,000 people, right?
So how to avoid such a mess? When you are I can imagine that many of people who are watching it already have their companies, maybe the small companies, 5 to 10 people, maybe already 20, maybe already 60, and they even need to scale it up, need to grow this company because the market demand is so huge that they need to respond faster, etc. Not only because they need to hire person X for problem X, but maybe there is some true reason for that. So how to start, so I don't want to use the word scaling, but how to start growing your organization in a good way so you will avoid this kind of mistakes.
Yeah, and here's the trick. Imagine that you have a Java developer and you say, hey, this guy has so much work to do that maybe he might need some help from another Java developer. So you go to the market, you find another Java developer. Now, the new person doesn't know the system, so most likely he needs or she needs to learn something from our expert. So you're gonna put them together, so the new person learns from the other person, and then you soon discover that you have 5 or 10 people in the Java team. Again, team in quote, because that's not the team, that's a separate story. And our expert becomes the team lead. And you end up with having a backlog of work for this team, and you have exactly the same with the tester, exactly the same with the front-end developers, exactly the same with the analyst or whatever. Somehow you don't know why those developers stop talking to the user, because you have some other proxy, and you ended up with having this Chinese whispering just by naturally growing your organization. So that is the moment you discover this one, it may be a little too late because you have already 50 people in the organization, right? And this is when we sometimes call the Agile Coach.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can solve it by yourself, and this is what I recommend. But sometimes, yeah, you can.
Sometimes you just need someone who will draw it for you on the wall and show you, okay.
Usually, again, this is about observing the system from outside, showing to the organization. Then we go through denial, acceptance, all of that, right? So the trick is, how do you create these teams that can deliver value? And what you do is, when you grow your team, when your team grows slowly, and usually, except for the rare cases when you grow super quickly, which is a separate story, but if you grow slowly, then usually you have 1-2 people joining you every few days. Every few months.
I know companies that they have a few people joining every few days.
Yeah, I know, but that's a separate story, because that's exponential growth, and that's again completely different experiment you need to have. But if you're growing your company pretty slowly, then at one moment you discover that your team is not working as a team anymore. Again, there is no magic number where it is, but most likely if you have 12 people on the team, most likely they're going to work as 2 separate teams or at 2 separate groups. So that might be a good idea to split it into the 2 separate teams. But again, make sure that those teams are not built around this specialization, around the technology, around some specific component, but make sure they can deliver value. So you split the teams, you create the teams that can deliver the value. Now, the trick is that, for example, in those 2 teams, you have just one person who knows Java or JavaScript or whatever else. Now, how do we do changes with 2 teams and only one person, avoiding by having this person in 2 teams at the same time? Now, you have 2 options. The more expensive is hire another JavaScript person. The cheapest option, and usually a faster option, is to learn it. So have one team have a JavaScript person, but the second team learn it a little bit so they can do the changes into the system. which means that you start hiring different kind of people, because you don't hire people with the narrow specialization, but you hire people who can learn and who can look at the system, at the product from the end-to-end perspective. There is also conversation, and unfortunately the conversation is in Polish, but I had a conversation with the CEO from Falcon V System company in Gdynia, and what she is saying is we hire people who look at the whole system. So we're looking for people who want to solve the customer problem, not to implement just solution. So what you discover is not just about the structure of the organization, but also about your hiring mechanism. So you need to change the way you hire people. You need to change the different kind of people you look for. So all the structure impact the way you do your business.
So garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah. So, and again, it's not about the people you hired usually, but this is about what the people are paid for. And by paying, I don't mean what they get salary for, but what are the reward system. And reward system is just tapping on the back. It's also a reward system. So if I have a Java developer who is rewarded for doing just Java, then how likely he's gonna take care of having a conversation with the user? How likely he's gonna take care of the testing? How likely he's gonna take care of this old stinky technology we have in the system since 2005, right? Now, if you build the team around the business and they say, hey, we need to take care of the stinky technology from 2005, what is interesting thing that is happening, I have no idea why, but those people are really willing to work in this old and fancy technology and solve the problems of their users. And it's happening in the organization. That's not just the magic kingdom. It's just really, really happening in the companies I'm working with. And I still have no idea why it is happening, but it is.
So it's mainly about building a proper culture that enforce or encourage this kind of behaviors around people or around the product.
That is a super tricky question. What Craig Larman is saying, and Craig Larman is this person staying behind the large space Scrum. He's saying culture follows structure. So what he's saying, in the large organization, you don't have a conversation with people about the culture, but you have a conversation about the structure. And the moment you're changing the structure, and the moment people start having this conversation with the user, start solving the user problem, the culture will follow the new structure. And this is what I've seen. Sorry, not I, in fact, this fact, we've seen as a ProCognita, because I haven't been involved, but one of our Agile coaches, Krzysztof, was involved in one of the largest IT organization, telco organization here in Poland, when they did change the structure of the organization from the component teams to the customer-oriented teams, so the cross-functional teams. This change led to many changes in the behavior of the organization. Despite all the problems they had, they start delivering features instead of components, and the change helped them solve a lot of problems. And I've seen this sometimes working in a large organization, sometimes not working in a large organization. So again, this is the experiment. The change of the structure is experiment, but often what we do is not having a conversation about the mindset, because this is super popular. Let's have a conversation about agile mindset and all this stuff. But you start doing a small experiment, and the culture change as a result of those small experiments. Some of them are not small, like changing the structure of 60 people department might not be a small change experiment, but you do that. And usually the behavior change as a result of the experiments you do, rather than try to explain to people why they should take care of the users. Because I can go to you and say, hey, your attitude is wrong, you're not customer centric, and then again I gave you bonus for doing just your own task. You don't care about the user. You care about your bonus at the end of the year.
Yeah, from my experience, there's plenty of people who say that, but in my organization it wouldn't work because people won't follow that. Like, people are used to the way they're working, etc. So for those people, when I used to be a consultant, I used to tell that, well, you can change people or you can change people. There is no other way if you want to make a change in the organization.
But yes, and I would say in the current organization, it may not work. Again, this is about experimenting, and there's also, if you don't change the organization, then people may, then this might not work. So
they need to change the structure, and people, if they don't feel that they fit the new structure, they can change organization.
This is So one of the things I discovered of a lot of years of my career, I'm gonna tell how many, is I stopped changing people. So I do experiment about the system around those people. I don't do experiment about people, and it usually helps me and usually helps those people. So I'm not trying to solve problem by changing the people. In most cases, people behave really reasonable in the system we have created. So if the people are doing some crazy things, my main question is
why?
How we created the system to force those people to behave this way, right? If you go to any places and you people have been you're flying with Ryanair and someone is yelling at you at the counter, you can say, well, what's wrong with these people? But you can also say, what are the consequences for these people for not doing something? In many cases, it is I will get fired or I will have a negative consequences of not doing something. So the only way I can do it is to start yelling at the customer in this case, right? Go with the Polish train company. Like most cases, you're gonna be late. And if you're late every single time you're going with the train and you're working for this train company, then you don't care. I mean, you're not gonna explain to the user why you're late because that's natural way of working.
So you will get your bonus. You will get promoted.
Get your bonus anyways. Now, if you go to Japan and your train is gonna be late 1 minute, then everybody is going to say sorry to you, and they're gonna explain to you why, because that's not normal. So people do care if they have an impact on the system. If they don't have any impact on the system, don't blame people, blame the system.
So getting back to my initial question, so how to design this kind of, let's call it culture, or this kind of set of behaviors, set of rules in the organization, so a person who is going to grow their company, his company or her company, will avoid these problems that we spoke before?
The first answer is I don't know, but I can give you a few experiments to try. And one of the experiments you can try is building this organization around business, so around value for the customers. So first of all, identify your customer, your users. And there is one caveat here. And this caveat is like a paying customer or paying user, not your internal departments. Because often what I'm hearing is, we have a user, this is the second department. Unless you're doing a software specifically for your customer support, most likely they are not your customer. They are just a separate department.
Even if you're building software for customer support, there is a customer that customer
Yes, as though in this case you need to have a conversation with the customer support to know how they solve the problem. Now, I had this kind of conversation with one company, a huge bank, and say, well, we're pretty agile. We can deliver something in 3 months. And I said, cool, we can go to the market with 3 months. They said, no. We send it to the separate department, which implement this for the next 2 years. So that is not so much adaptive, I would say. But again, who is your user? Then you can define the products you have, right? What is your product? Now, my recommendation is the broader definition you have, the better, right? So most cases for me, banking is one product. If you go to the bank, then you will find a plenty number of the products things they call products. But from my perspective, I just want to have online banking. That's it, right? So from my perspective, banking is one thing. From bank perspective, it was like the stuff. So what you try to do is define the products. How many products you have? And then you try to build the teams around this product. So the team can take problem from the user's problem, let's call it challenge, and deliver the solution for this problem. And of course, by experimenting with the different approach and all this stuff, because the team also don't know what they don't know, and most likely users are going to use the product different way than we think they're going to use. So the team need to have a ability to solve this problem, which means often skills, but also it means to be able to change the system, right? So if my team can only change this part of the software, and they cannot touch this part of the software because this belongs to the different team, then most likely they're not gonna do the change that that can have a value for the customer, that can impact the user. The other thing is, because you have all those specialists in the organization, what you discover is you cannot create 5 or 6 teams that can solve customer problem, because you have just one expert on the X component or the X technology, and you cannot spread this person throughout the 6 teams. So what you discover is something I call the knowledge depth. And basically what you need to do is invest a lot of time into learning. And so it's not just about changing the structure, but understanding that there will be a lot of learning happening. The people need to learn how to talk to the users, because you didn't allow them to have this conversation for the last 10 years. What I'm hearing, I'm going to this kind of organization, I'm hearing the developers cannot talk to users. Well, yeah, because they need to learn how to do it, right? When I was born, I didn't know how to ski. Surprise, right? But I was able to learn it in the safe way, so I'm still alive. And exactly the same with the developers. How do you help them learn to have this conversation? And this goes through anything else you need to do in the system, coding, testing, developing, whatever, right? This needs to happen. You need to invest time into that.
So the earlier you start teaching all of your people to do various stuff, it's better, because then this knowledge depth will be lower, or it won't even exist.
And it is about on the team level. This is one thing. The second thing is that they need to know why they need to learn, right? Because again, you can say, hey, I'm a Java developer, I don't want to do any testing, right? It makes sense if your goal is to create a Java, except in most cases, your goal is to solve customer problem.
The wording system that supports it.
Exactly. If you award narrow specialization, then you're gonna have a narrow specialization. Now, my recommendation in this case, hire engineers, not developers. The developers are creating code. Engineers are supposed to solve the problem.
You can call it whatever you want. Yeah, that's just you can call it developer, you can call it engineer. From my perspective, it doesn't matter. It's mainly the way you assess their knowledge, but what's more important, the way you assess their mindset. We were still planning to have one of the next episodes about hiring people for startups, for any company, for any product company, and how we also were going to share how we do this, because we are hiring this kind of people, like people who are problem solvers, people who are focused on the customers, on their needs. The customers of our customers, users and their needs, and who are also our system, it's more or less supporting this kind of behaviors as you described. So yes, but I know it wasn't easy to build this kind of organization structure, and also to build this kind of rewarding or even supporting system. I don't want to call it rewarding.
And again, I call those people engineers. Call them whatever you want. Call them developers. Except that you have hired people and told them during the hiring period that their goal is to create a Java code, and they still think that their goal is to create a Java code. So one of the great thing in Motorola when I used to work there is we call everybody a software engineer. No matter what you've been doing, you're a software engineer. You may have a different salary, you may have a different expertise, all the stuff, but you're a software engineer. I really love this one. You can have even the different things on the post on the LinkedIn, what you do, but inside the organization, try to have software engineers or the product engineers in this case.
Product engineers sounds even better. Okay, so maybe there are some common misconceptions about scaling Agile that you notice when you're working with companies, especially that you, as you mentioned, you like to work with the companies at 60 to 100, so they are already after this first stage of growing, and as you mentioned, they are usually calling you not without a reason. So maybe there are some common patterns that you see that they made common mistakes, like over and over again. You go to the company and see, again, they do the same. They never learn.
So first of all, there are some patterns in the organization. And talking about the scaling patterns, the most common misconception and the most common mistake is that you should not. Try not to scale. That is the very, very first point. In most cases, it is ignored. I mentioned Kroglerman already, and there is a lovely slide on his training. When we go to this training, basically, if you haven't been to the Kroglerman training, that's I know this is art, but it's like a mind-blowing art training. So go there, and the training is on scaling. And the very first slide is multi-site, don't, large-scale Scrum, don't, multi-team, don't. And he say, you're still gonna do it. So one of the reasons for scaling is because we think we need to deliver more.
Mm-hmm.
And in most cases, the cost of scaling are way higher than the cost of focusing on the important things. So there are awesome companies delivering amazing product with a small number of people. In Krakow, there's a company called Infact. I love those people. And one of the great things they did is they managed to highly improve the quality of the product, the value proposition to the customer, and grow the product super fastly with exactly the same people. The only thing they did is they stopped it doing things that are not critical. I had a conversation with Sebastian Bobrowski from Infact, and what he's saying, we're selecting between the very, very important things to do and the very, very, very important things to do, and we select the second, right? So most cases, why you're trying to scale is you're trying to do too many things at the same time. My recommendation is focus on prioritization rather than on scaling. If you have too much budget, coming back to the conversation we had before, hiring more people is easier than saying no to more videos, especially that if you have too big budget, then in most cases this budget comes from some other people who have some expectation from your product. So you need to do something, add some features like make sure this goes on the blockchain or whatever else. AI, don't forget the AI, and we need to mention this right now in any conversation we have.
Yes.
And you end up with having too many teams coming from too many features you're trying to implement. So my recommendation is don't. If you have scale, then have a look at the structure and see how you can change the structure.
Design the structure when you start hiring more people instead of hiring people and then changing.
That's a great idea, because in this case you may not call me because you may not have those problems, right? So again, most cases when I'm being called is because you have a structure when people don't talk to each other, or because you're trying to do too many things at the same time and you end up with unmet promises because you say to the customer, we're going to deliver this one, and you end up with delivering something else. And that's not the metaphor. This is the conversation with the customer. I go to the customer and we have a conversation like they say, hey, Tomek, we have a problem. Most cases, they have a problem with estimating, by the way. We have the problem with estimating, and they say, "Oh, we cannot deliver. We don't get what we want." I say, "So you get half of what you want," assuming that they're trying to push too much work on the team, and they say, "No, we ask for one thing and we get the different things." I say, "That's an interesting situation."
Doesn't sound like a problem with estimating.
Yeah, it doesn't look like a problem with the estimating. So let's have a look at what you have delivered last 2 weeks, and let's have a look at how many items you have delivered last 2 weeks. And they say like 6 important items, ignoring the not important. And I say, how many important items you have these 2 weeks? And they say 36. So how likely you're gonna get those 6 items if that is your capacity? How likely you're gonna get those 6 items you care about, not your teams care about? And yeah, most likely you're not gonna deliver on promise. So most likely your estimation won't be met. So your deadline won't be met. But it's not because you cannot estimate, because this is because you cannot focus on one thing. And they say, yeah, but in this case, we would need to go to the team and say, you guys need to work on something that is important for the customer, not something that is interesting for you. And I say, yeah, that's the prioritization. And this is the difficult situation, right? So it's easier sometimes to hire more people to do 36 things at the same time.
Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean that it's needed to do 36 at the same time. slow.
But it is easier. Sometimes it's easier to hire 36 teams than to make a decision to not to do 30 items, right?
So how to discover what is very, very important and what is very, very, very important and what is not so much important?
I have no idea. The moment I will have this idea, most likely I'm gonna retire. So my observation from all these companies I've seen, because you're selecting between the items that can give you like $1 million and have 52% of success, and something that can give you $1.5 million and it has like 48% of success. You have no idea, right? Now, if you select correctly, then you can write a book about how to select the correct, how to do the correct prioritization. If you didn't select the correctly, then you still can write a book, but no one gonna read this book anyway. So, frankly saying, I still have no idea. One of the things I know is like, if you get a quick feedback from the user, so you have idea, you go check this idea, you figure out it's wrong, you create another idea, you go check this idea, if you figure out it's wrong, and then one day, if you still have a budget, you will discover that you solved the problem. Then you have a higher chance of likelihood, right? So all this idea behind the lean startup, doing the quick experimentation, doing the hypothesis testing, all this stuff comes to mind, right? So again, how do you know that you're wrong? How do you know that you're correct? In most cases, like 50% of the time, you're wrong. Most product owners, most product managers, it's not about you, it is about your market. Most cases, you're wrong. And now you have two options. You either you burn all the budget you have doing a great software no one cares about, but you can also drink beer, eat pizza, celebrate the next milestone, all the stuff. Or you do a lot of quick testing. If you do a lot of quick testing, then you discover that you're wrong. And if your organization is adaptive enough that you can change the direction, coming back why I need adaptability, then what you can do, you can deliver more likely again. It is about likelihood. It's not about being 100% sure, but you can increase the likelihood of succeeding.
So, I think that way we are getting to the topic of product management, because this is all what the maybe not all, but most of the product management is about, like how to choose the right thing to implement and how to even decrease the scope and how to design this kind of small experiment that you will go with which you will go to the market fast and test it at the low cost. So what's your experience? What's your opinion? Do you see maybe some patterns that the companies that have like a great, astonishing product management and the companies that are missing product management, maybe there are some patterns between them, like one are better, hopefully, and other are not?
So one thing I already mentioned is like the great companies know they don't know. I mean, in those not so great companies, I'm going to call it like a product arrogance. We think we know. And now, if you are a Steve Jobs, then you might have an intuition and you might have guessed correctly. Most cases, you don't know. And the sooner you learn and the sooner you accept, because there's one thing that you learn, but second thing is like many companies learn and they ignore the data and they say, Tomek, you don't understand our context. Yeah, our users are not using this system, but because they don't know yet about how awesome it is. So I'm going to add more feature, except that, they don't log into the system because they are afraid, because you make so complicated login in system
registration
process that people cannot register, but you're adding all the features, behind the registration wall. By the way, it is again not the metaphor. This is a story of one of the customers.
Say it many times as well. So
yeah, so the great organization, they know they don't know, and they're doing a lot of experiment. Now, what they can do, they focus on one thing. So instead of focusing on adding features and plenty of features, and product management comes with a list of feature, and then someone do those features, right? What they do is they come with some impact they want to achieve. So they say, okay, our problem is no one cares about our product, or no one is logging in, or we lose people so they go to payments page and they drop from the website or whatever else, right? You create a problem and you say, hey, this is the impact we want to have. And you create a few hypotheses and you test those hypotheses. Now, if your system allows you to test, so you have a customer-centric team, and software development is done the right way. In 2023, you are supposed to have an option to do a lot of A/B testing, not to have 3 months releases, right? Just to mention this one. So you can do a lot of testing. Now, why not? You should not have a 3 months releases. The reason for that is that if you have a 3 months releases, how many experiments you can do during 1 year? So you're gonna guess a lot of more than if you can do an experiment every 5 minutes. There is a story from company TripAdvisor when the CEO is saying, what we do is a lot of 404 testing. We usually put a link to our website. You click this link and you end up on the page not found. But what we get is a lot of information about how many people clicked this link, and the cost of adding the link is super low. But we don't invest into the whole feature. We just collect the numbers. And if we have like 10,000 people who want to have this feature, then we can build this feature, but we can learn this in 5 minutes. Now, those kind of testing is now way more fancy in 2023. But again, if you cannot do all this testing every 5 minutes in your organization, that's why you need to have all these engineering practices done right. Then you will be guessing more, and more likely you're gonna be wrong. I mean, you're gonna be wrong again, but it's like you're gonna learn later about being wrong. And if you learn about after 3 months about being wrong, then how likely you're gonna change all the plans you have?
So aside of being a consultant, you're also a certified Scrum trainer from Scrum Alliance. So when you are visiting these companies that you are consulting, do you see any common misconception in terms of implementing Scrum in these companies? What's the common problems or the common misconceptions they implement?
So, frankly saying, I don't care about Scrum. I do care about adaptivity of the organization. If you can use Scrum, awesome. If you can use Kanban, awesome. If you can do potatoes, tomatoes, oranges, that is awesome. It is not about doing something. The number of misconceptions is growing every day because the awareness of Scrum existing on the world is growing every day. But again, it is the biggest misconception, I believe, here. It is something that the team is supposed to do. So what I was trying to show you over the last few minutes, years, hours, whatever, during our conversation, is that it is about the changing the structure. And Scrum, it is about changing the organization. It is not something you do at the bottom of the organization. And the biggest mistakes companies do is like, we're gonna be agile, so we're gonna go to those people at the bottom of the organization, tell them they are supposed to do the Scrum, but we're not gonna change anything else. And they're looking for the frameworks that meet the current structure, which is not optimal for delivering a value, for testing, for experimenting. They find finally something that meets their needs, and they say, oh, that is something exactly that's going to work here. The problem is you have a wrong structure in the organization, and until you change the structure organization, until you change your policies, until you change the way you reward people, this Scrum thing is not going to work. So I don't care about Scrum. I do care about how you reward people, how you make sure that they learn new things, how do they if they have conversation with the users, how often do they solve the problems, do they see how their solution address or don't address the problem. This is what I care about.
Let's talk a little bit about this adaptation of Agile Scrum methods on the market right now. So when I used to be an Agile consultant, it was like 10 years ago or something like this. I remember we've been in a situation where we were still let's say it's early adapters of Agile. Like there were not so many companies, like any company that wanted to learn about agility, Agile, etc. They were like considered as an early adapters. Back then, like even few years before that, and when I worked as a developer in another software house in a small company, we were even innovators. Like I remember the time when we were like one of 4 companies in Poland who were actually using knowing anything about Agile and trying to work in Agile. It was back in 2008, 2007. Something like this. how does it look like right now? I don't have, this knowledge about the market as you do right now. So the main reason I'm asking is that still we have it's like a 10 years later. So I can imagine that there is a huge progress on the market, and in the knowledge about Agile became something that maybe already should be in the mainstream. We should already cross the chasm, and people should at least start talking about it, start learning about it. But still, I see that many of our clients who ask us for working with them or something like this, what they are asking for is usually like, we need to know what's your estimates on a fixed budget, fixed scope project that we want to work with you, which doesn't seem very agile. So how does it look like right now on the market?
Right. There are so many dimensions to this question that I'm gonna try to address at least few of them, because otherwise it's gonna take us another hour. Like yesterday or 2 days ago, I watched a great video by Jim Highsmith, one of the co-authors of the Agile Manifesto, and he said, like, in the beginning of the 21st century, this Agile thing was done by a few teams, like what you say, there were teams inside the organization who were trying this one. And he said a lovely story about Mike Cohn going to one of this organization, and the CEO says, hey, I have 3 teams working in this Agile approach. And Mike Cohn come back a few days later and say, hey, you have 4 teams working in this approach. So the CEO didn't know about one of the teams. So that was a really team level. Now what happened later is like some of the executives say, this is the game changer. So we can do something amazing by having that in the other organization. And they were brave enough to try this with all this organization. That was crazy. 20 years ago, that was crazy. 15 years ago, that was crazy idea, right? Now, as the time goes on, more and more companies join the bandwagon. And the thing is, you mentioned the Crossing the Chasm book. The thing is, if you look at the curve, if you look at how the early or late majority is defined, Roger Moore says something like, those people are not looking for revolution, they're looking for the evolution. So they don't want to have a huge change. And many of those companies who joined now the Agile movements, they don't want to have the Agile as a game changer, as their marketing is, as this business lever, how do we compete our competitor? How do we work on the market? How do we compete in the other companies? They want to see a little bit of improvement, make it a little better. It's bad, so like 10% improvement is also it's all we need, right? And there are a lot of this kind of companies. So most of the companies, they at least heard about Agile. Again, a lot of misconceptions on the stuff. The thing is like, there are 2 interesting things. Like most of the companies, as I said, they heard about Agile, but most of those companies, again, didn't want to have a huge change. So one of the reasons I'm working with smaller companies, again, is because those are the companies who want to see those revolution, not just the revolution, but more likely the revolution. And this is more interesting from my perspective to see real change happening, not just, we're doing a daily stand-up every 2 days and we call it daily, or whatever. That was a sarcasm, by the way, for those people who don't recognize it. But they really want to have this competitive advantage coming from this Agile. Now, just because in software development this is happening doesn't mean that on the other markets it is late majority. Many cases, there are awesome companies outside software development which are going into software development. Hardware development as a market is 10 times bigger, at least as the software development. Now, with hardware, we're exactly the same place we used to be 20 years ago in software development. Everybody knows that you need to do this sequentially. So plan and execute the plan. Everybody knows that the Agile approach doesn't work here because we have a limitation. And there are few crazy companies who try to do something different.
Basics.
like SpaceX. I mean, they're doing a testing every 2 or 3 months, and if the rocket blows up, there's a lot of learning opportunity, and they're going to create a new rocket, and it's gonna blow up, and they're gonna create a new rocket.
Every next time they make it cheaper.
Few weeks ago, there was information coming from the SpaceX, and exactly the largest rocket just blew up in April. So that was like, let's say 2 months after the last test, and they say we're gonna do another testing with the new rocket, and we have implemented over 1,000 changes into the system. I'm not talking about the trivial changes, but there are significant changes, 1,000 system. So any company who cannot do the 1,000 changes into the system, because Tomek, you don't understand our context and we are special. Sorry guys, hardware development, it is already happening there. And one of the reasons for this one is because Elon Musk comes from the software development and he understands that either you do the quick testing or you stay behind, right? So that is a revolution happening there right now.
And SpaceX is still not so big company. Like this is, I don't know how many people there works, but it's still like, I would say, medium-sized company, if not even small company, considering this kind of industry especially.
Think about the disruption that Tesla is doing on the car market, right? Most of the car companies were pretty good till the Tesla comes in. They change the market, so either you catch up or you end up trying, as they say it, right?
So why do you think? What's the reason that still so many people have this fixed waterfall, fixed project, fixed scope, fixed budget
Because
mindset?
Think about it, like if I have a plan, I would rather not do changes. The change into my plan are super frustrating. If I want to go for a beer today, and I don't know, I cannot go for a beer today, that's going to be frustrating. And most of the organizations rather stick to the unrealistic plan than change the plan, right? So it's more comfortable to have a plan. It's more comfortable to have a feeling that you know what's going to happen. Plans give you the security that you think you know.
Right? If you know.
You think you know, but that is why we have so many companies earning money on predicting the future, right? I mean, that's guessing, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
But just yesterday, I've seen the information how the market is going to look like 50 years from now. I'm pretty sure that was accurate guessing, right? So we love to have predictions. We still don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but we love to have the predictions, and it is just easier. So if your company is doing pretty good with the predictive approach, so you can plan and execute the plan, then the change to the more difficult approach of more adaptive development gonna be painful. So my recommendation is don't until you feel there is a real need of doing agile, of becoming more agile as an organization. Try not to, because otherwise you're gonna frustrate those few people who want to be more adaptive. The only change you're going to have is you're gonna change the name of people in the name people have on the business cards or on the LinkedIn, and that's it. Nothing will change, right? So, and you end up with saying like, well, Tomek, Agile is not working here. It is not much about Agile in this case.
Mm-hmm. So what about startups? Should startups, or maybe not all of them, but when should startups aim for being agile and when not?
So we mentioned agile approach and we mentioned the predictive approach. There is one more approach that is often being perceived as agile approach. This is something I call no process,
mm-hmm.
which basically means we do what needs to be done. That is not agile approach. This is like forward development, cowboy coding, whatever
mm-hmm.
to call it. Many startups are doing great with this approach. Mm-hmm. So if it is working for you, then have a conversation. You want to do a more structured approach to the software development. Other is more structured development. The cowboy coding has some cons, but often if I have 5 people in the organization, then iterative development may not be the way to.
Especially when you just started, like a few people in the team. You're doing cowboy coding. Of course, there is some risk behind of it, especially in long term, and some cost of it. But also, your entire product, your entire company is a very risky business, and you have like a 5% chance that you will survive the first year. So who cares about it?
On the other hand, if you discover that everyone is super busy, everybody's doing their best, and you don't deliver anything, and like you spend like 6 months and you have nothing to show to your customers, then maybe, just maybe, there's a good moment to have a conversation. How about we deliver anything in 2 weeks cycle, and then get the feedback, and then deliver something, and then get the feedback. By the way, when we are changing our website, we had exactly the same approach. We say it's gonna take like few days or few weeks. And 6 months later, 3 months later, we say, hey, we have a lot of in progress work, but nothing delivered to the customer. So how about we eat our own dog food and start doing this iteratively? And this is what we did with our website. But before that, we basically were doing a cowboy coding, and it worked pretty well, except that we haven't delivered anything. Right? So,
yeah, this is why I'm always saying that, especially when you are starting a greenfield project, greenfield product, greenfield organization, etc., like starting it right is actually will not cost you anything extra. It will cost you the same as starting it without any process or whatever. So why not to start it right from the first time? Of course, you need to have the knowledge. So this is crucial.
yeah, and you need to have this knowledge. You need to explain transfer this knowledge to other people. So I don't know, it doesn't cost anything.
Mm-hmm.
Although if you have right people who has this knowledge already, then probably. If you think about the why Eric Ries started with the Lean Startup, they were doing a great iterative development, except they haven't been delivering the value to the customer. This is why he say, okay, let's do more hypothesis testing rather than a lot of iterative development of what people don't care about.
Mm-hmm. So let's get back to Agile and startups. So if you could name a few methods, tools, practices from Agile that every startup should at least try, what it would be?
I would say have a conversation with the user, a face-to-face conversation. Observe those people. By the way, don't ask them what they need. See how they behave. Try to understand the problem. So don't try to ask the question about the features they need, because that's not gonna work. There's also a super short video that is called the MOM test. And this is something I would recommend to any startup owner to watch it, because it shows you how to not to run your conversation and how to run your conversation. So this is one thing. The second thing is make sure that you can do a lot of chip testing. So make sure that you can create a software iteratively. And by iteration, I mean a lot of small testing. Like if you're starting the software development and you cannot deliver anything in 2 weeks, that's a disaster. I mean, I understand why banks has a problem with this one. But in 2023, if you cannot do the software every 2 weeks, that's a disaster. You're supposed to go to production every 5 minutes, not every 2 weeks in 2023. Amazon was able to go to production over 10 years ago every 12 seconds or so, right? So it is doable. It's just about the investment into the right infrastructure, about the right skills and all this stuff. So I would recommend starting with those two and make sure that you're trying to solve the problems, not to implement the feature, right? So that would be the number 3.
Perfect. So last but not least, let's try to guess what will happen in the next few years. What do you think is the future? What are the trends right now? In terms of Agile and Scrum, is there anything that will change, or we are still just adapting things that were discovered a couple of years ago and we're going this direction?
So, okay, I don't care about Agile and Scrum, to make it clear. What I'm interested in is how the companies do. And what is happening, I don't think it's just specific for current situations. And I'm not going to guess, I'm going to base on the history just to say what is happening. It's like you have companies who know how to do 20, 50 A/B testing at the same time. Like Facebook, Google, they are doing a lot of testing, and the way you see your application is different from the way I see my application, right? Mm-hmm. They know how to do it. At the same time, you have companies who had no idea how to go to production every 3 months. So you have a huge spread between those companies. And I believe there will be companies who are getting better and better, and the companies who, as long as they have enough money, they're going to survive. The question is how long. That's a separate question. Maybe that's not too long, right? If you are doing well, then probably you don't need to change your organization right now. Some of the companies like bank, they discover that they are not the finance companies, they are the IT companies, they are tech companies. Like ENG CEO said this 3 years ago that we are the tech company, and they do invest a lot into making a lot of changes so they can do this kind of things we just said. So we're getting more into the chip testing. So one of the great things about the cloud, about the DevOps ideas is like you can do a lot of chip testing. You can do a lot of testing on the small group of small subset of your customers. You can do a lot of testing on the specific market. You can easily deploy. You can easily scale, and this is what is interesting for you as a manager. I have no idea which direction we're gonna go from this one, but my assumption is that the best companies are going to use this as their competitive advantages. So they're gonna go faster on the market. You think about like Revolut as one of the examples of the companies that disrupted the market. Mm-hmm. They were so fast in going to the market that basically they had like 1.5 year of being on the market, and like a blue ocean. No one could do anything. It took over a year for any bank to come with anything that was, let's say, close. Yeah. was giving, and this is what I'm interested in. So I don't care about Agile and Scrum. I do care about the companies who are doing great things. Now, how you do this on the small scale as a startup, and then the separate story, how do you grow as a company? Because as you grow, as what we said, is like you need different experiment, you need a different structure, you need different skills and all this stuff. So this is what I care about.
Okay, thank you very much for this conversation. To all of you, if you like it, please thumbs up on YouTube and rate our podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcast. And hope you will subscribe for the next episodes. And thank you very much for listening and watching us.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Pragmatic Talks is delivered to you by Pragmatic Coders, the first choice software development partners for startup founders. Be sure to catch all new episodes. Subscribe to our YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcast channels. And if you are thinking about building your own startup or struggling with product development, contact us and find out what we can do together.